everybody. Welcome to another edition of Get Lit. I'm Kate.
And I'm Pat.
And we are in the midst of summer reading now, summer reading program, and so Pat and I are here today to give you some summer reading recommendations, and we're pretty excited to share them with you. Would you like to start out?
I sure will. When I think summer reading, I think beach reads. And so I found an article that listed about 20 book beach reads to look forward to, and I chose some out of that to share with you. But first I found this interesting. I looked up the definition of beach reads, and here you go. Over time, a beach read began to describe a certain type of book that will give mass appeal and is not particularly intellectually stimulating. Also often described as women's fiction, romance, domestic, psychological thrillers, or contemporary novels with female characters. Didn't like the last part. Another definition is simply this: escapes from reality, easy to read, and accessible to many readers. I thought that fit the definition much better. So I will start out with a few. Kate and I will go back and forth, but it seemed to be, if you're going to have a book beach read, you should be on Nantucket, Cape Cod. And two of our books that I'm going to talk about today take place right there. First, A Paper Palace by Miranda Heller. And it starts out, this house, this place knows all my secrets. A story of summer secrets, love and lies. In the course of a singular day on Cape Cod, one woman must make a life-changing decision that has been brewing for decades. Our main character has been happily married to Peter for many, many years, but she had a secret romance as a teenager with Joshua. Something tragic came up in that relationship and they parted ways, until now. She and Joshua shared a night together. And now she must reckon, who does she want to spend the rest of her life with? Her beloved husband of many years and the father of her 3 children? Or Joshua? To this day, we arrive at her ultimate decision with all its complexities. Tender yet devastating, The Paper Palace considers the tension between desire and dignity, the legacies of abuse, and the crimes and misdemeanors of our families. Fit the ticket, right? Cannot have a beach read without looking forward to Ellen Hillenbrand. And this year, her beach read book is called Golden Girl, a heartfelt, compelling tale that sweeps you away in the idyllic Nantucket Island and into the life of novelist Vivian Howe, a mother of 3 who, after being killed by a hit-and-run accident, is given one last chance to watch over those she loves from beyond. She is given 3 grants of nudging her family in moving on to the right direction, away from the mistakes that she fears that she will make before she finally has to cross over. Overall, Golden Girl is another absorbing, nostalgic, poignant tale by Hillenbrand and does a beautiful job of reminding us that to be human is to be flawed, and everyone who deserves to be loved should be loved for who they are and who they may not be. Look forward to that one. Kate, your turn.
Great. What I'm really focusing on in this particular clip that we're doing is something that we haven't really turned our focus on specifically before, which is not only audiobooks, but specifically downloadable audio. I confess here that I use Overdrive Libby, same thing, every day, hours per day. I used to be a naysayer about audio fiction, saying it doesn't count, but Then my mother lost her eyesight, and the only way she can read is being read to. And I am not going to come out there and say being read to doesn't count, because it really does. And what you'll find if you come to love audiobooks like I do, is you're going to find that you really have a lot of narrators that you love, and that you will return to again and again. And it's a wonderful way to take in and absorb a book. It's particularly memorable quite often, too. Now, my first choice is somebody who's just fun, and you're not going to get the same experience just reading her novel, though that's fun, as listening to her say it. Although this isn't a novel, I'm sorry, this is essays. This is Samantha Irby, who is a contemporary, very hot right now, essay writer. Sort of a new and happy addition to the groups of books we read, those of us who love to read witty essays by smart people. She definitely qualifies. She's, I would say, someone who, I guess, fits a lot of categories that people like to put people into as writers. She happens to be black, she happens to be bisexual, she happens to suffer from a few different medical maladies that really have changed her life in a way. But she really, I would say her writing, while she doesn't shy away from talking about those things, her writing really refuses to fall into a category, because she just is Samantha Irby. And her voice is so strong and so funny and so smart that you will just enjoy spending time with her. She talks about everything. She talks about how she began with her blog. So many people begin being writers by having a successful blog. Hers is called, she doesn't contribute to it as much as she used to, called Word That Rhymes with Witches, Gotta Eat. Okay, a lot of fun now that she's such a successful published writer, and also things are being optioned into TV shows and other things. She's not having as much time to sit around and contribute to a blog, which, by the way, for those of you who aren't into blogs yet, it just means web log, something where somebody is contributing basically like diary entries every day, every few days, whatever, just talking about anything. There's gardening blogs, food blogs, lifestyle blogs. And hers was, I would say, maybe more lifestyle than anything else. But this one I'm talking about is called Wow, No Thank You. That is her current book of essays. It came out in 2020. It's available in both audio, downloadable, and print form, and also e-downloadable. Just hearing her talk about how she started with her blog, talking about what it was like growing up poor as she did, and just very shy and often alone, and not knowing quite who she was or where she fit in, which is a familiar thing for a lot of people, and finding herself going on to the unlikely road to fame and relative fortune, although she insists that no, she is not rich, so don't be asking for a nice bag for Christmas. It's just really a pleasure to get to know her. So wow, no thank you, I can't recommend it enough. Oh, by the way though, she is also known as one of our more profane authors of essays of today, so if you are somebody who is offended by very frank treatment of sex and bodily functions, be warned. Okay, so I'm going to begin with that one. My other ones that I go on to from here are a little more serious. So let's get back to beach reads.
My goodness, I think I'd like to take that on a road trip. So my next one that I am going to talk about is by Kristen Higgins, and it's called Pack Up the Moon. And this one is, again, think beach fiction, delivers an outstanding romantic weeper with this tale of young newlyweds facing a terminal illness. The young woman, the wife, has been faced with a terminal illness and is coming to terms with the future for her husband and what she can do to make the transition from their idyllic married life now to the after. So what she's determined to do is leave a little bit of herself in her husband Josh's life after she's gone. She does so, I think this is very charming, she does so by writing letters to Josh and leaving them with her best friend to dole out one a month for a year after her death. The letters are structured to-do lists ranging from basic tasks to ensure that Josh takes care of himself, such as go to the grocery store, stop eating food from cartons over the sink, don't be a loser, to encouragement to start new relationships. This is a book of delightful supporting characters who add to the charm, such as the Banana Republic salesman, who comforts Josh after a breakdown while trying to fulfill one of Lauren's tasks. Perfect pacing and plotting lift Higgins' masterly latest. This is going to break and restore a lot of hearts. I just found this to be an endearing summary of the book, and I think this one I will look forward to reading too. And then this is another one that fits that same ticket. It's An Extraordinary Friendship, A Lifetime of Stories, and the last one begins here. The book is called The 100 Years of Lenny and Margot. Life is short. No one knows better than 17-year-old Lenny, who is living on the terminal ward. But she is about to learn if only what you make life matters. It's who you share it with. So she joins an art group that was offered at the hospital for patients to engage in something to do, to meet other people and whatever. And this 17-year-old girl meets this lovely 83-year-old woman who too is approaching her end. And they realize together that they have lived an astonishing 100 years. So through their art, they share stories of what each of their years have been, the first 17 and the other of the 83. They are painting their life stories, growing old and staying young, of giving joy, of relative kindness, of losing love, and of finding a person who is everything. This story is just, I think, going to be very heartwarming. As their extraordinary friendship deepens, it becomes vividly clear that life is not done with Lenny and Margot yet. It's going to be a wonderful story of the infinite capacity for friendship and love for those who need it most. Another wonderful story to look forward to. Kate?
I remember reading about that one, and that's one that I was looking
Yes.
forward to also.
I think we'll have some depth and something that we can all relate to. I sort of felt as I was reading that I love books that kind of have to do, oh my goodness, I'm going to use a very trite word and I don't mean to, but the sisterhood of women. And I think one of the first books that I read many years ago by Lisa C., The Secret, Snowflower and the Secret Fan, is that what it is? And that was such a wonderful story, the endurance of women's friendships. That's what I see in this book. So,
Cool. Well, no, see, this is one thing I like about doing these things is we both get ideas what to read. So that reminds me too, patrons, anyone watching this, you know, I like it so much when a patron comes in and says, okay, Kate, you've got to read this thing.
Yes.
I have been turned on to so many standalone books and series
Absolutely.
by patrons. So please do share your inspirations and ideas with us when you come in. I have a couple notes here. I don't know that I'm really going to use them, but my last two that I'm going to talk about, they're also audiobooks, and essentially more or less both nonfiction. This second to last one I'm talking about is a fictionalized version of someone's life. This is such an unusual topic. It's such an unusual subject for a book. The Last Great Road Bum. Great cover, you'll be seeing it now, by Hector Tovar, who is an author based in Los Angeles. He's of Guatemalan heritage, but he grew up in America. His parents are from Guatemala. He came into, he's a nonfiction writer. He contributes to a lot of well-known journals and is well-known and award-winning. And he came into the possession of the notes of this seemingly ordinary man, a guy born in Urbana, Illinois in the 40s who decided he was going to go off and have an unusual life and write about it. He was a fan of Kerouac and people like that, and he was going to just see the world and be a professional bum and be a published writer and write about his travels. Now, the sad thing is that all during his life, nobody would publish anything he wrote. He kept sending off manuscripts again and again, fiction and nonfiction both. They all got sent back. So now, he went all over the world. He went literally to I don't think he went to Antarctica, but he went to every other continent, into the farthest reaches of each one, seeing what he could see, deciding what he thought of it as a young and increasingly older man. He spent a great deal of time in Jamaica and out-of-the-way places in South America and Asia, and I'll give a little more detail about that in a minute. And his purpose was he wanted to make sure and get to know what he thought of as the people and not just hang out with tourists the same color as himself everywhere he went. He found out in Jamaica in the 60s and thereabouts that it was actually illegal to hang out with native Jamaicans if you were white. Who knew that that was the case? That the police basically stopped him and said, look, you've got to go and hang out at this resort or you're going to be deported. Bit of an eye-opener. It's too bad that really his notes weren't published because he really had some extraordinary experiences. Later on, during the worst, arguably who can say when is the worst of the Vietnam War, but in the midst of some of the worst of it, he decided he wasn't drafted. I think he was a little old to be drafted by then, although maybe he was just the right age. He had avoided being drafted. He had already served time in the Army in younger time in his life, but he went over to Vietnam voluntarily just to see what was going on. He posed as a photojournalist so he could get close to the action and talk to soldiers, talk to medics, talk to people. He had medic experience, so he often, where he went, would get recruited to help people medically, even though he had no call, even legally, to be there. And people would ask, why are you there? Why are you doing this? And the answer is never really very clear. He just wanted to see what he would see and sort of experience misery, starvation, strife firsthand. Maybe because of, the author conjectures, I should say, Hector Tobar came into possession of this man's journals and read all of what he wrote about and had to come to his own conclusions as to what motivated him to go to these places. And I don't think that he had some foolish romantic idea about what he was doing. He was very much wanting to be close to the heart of what people were experiencing rather than exploit them. But for whatever reason, publishers didn't see him as the best coverer of his own experience, and so it fell to Hector Tobar to tell his story. So he went to Biafra during the Civil War and was a medic there, sort of under suspicious auspices, again, not really legally there, and looking at people starving, looking at people who were horribly injured. Then finally, his final decision, he's pushing 40 at this point. During the Reagan years, he goes to El Salvador and decides to join up with the rebels. And it was a final decision. I have to say the writing of the book really hits its stride once he gets there. Like Joe Sanderson's life, it was very scattered, the writing kind of was, until it hits this point. He now has a cause that he believes in. He's now become brothers, although like a much older brother or uncle to these young fighters. And like it or not, he's committed now. Even at the point where he's done some fighting, he's even done some killing, which he feels pretty iffy about. Now he wants to go home. They don't let him go home because it's gotten too complicated now. And it's no secret, it's understood, you find out at the beginning that this is where he died. But he sure, I don't think anyone knew, including his mother, who he wrote to till the end of his days, knew that his life would end up where it did. But what you finally get are some of his journal entries, committed verbatim by Mr. Tobar into the book. It's certainly a very unusual life, and it's worth reading about. You certainly aren't going to read a lot of true stories like it. Another thing that Tobar does that's really interesting is has little humorous footnotes contributed by what he thinks Sanderson would think of the writing that he's doing. Saying, well, I don't think he's being particularly fair to me here when he says this. So, I mean, it's really an interesting experience as a book. So, yeah, I recommend The Last Great Road Bump, Hector Tobar. Okay, then finally, boy, is this an exceptional and unusual thing. Maybe you've heard of it. For over the space of maybe between 10 and 15 years, an Arizona psychiatrist, Howard Cutler, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama got together over the space of years, met every so often, and had these deep discussions about human happiness and whether or not it's possible. Out of these discussions, which are just fascinating and pretty much given to us verbatim over the years, conversations, they would meet in different places, sometimes here in Arizona, and sometimes where the Dalai Lama lives in Tibet, and talk about what are the things that keep human beings individually from being happy as a species, what are the things that get in the way emotionally, how does hate and prejudice and history, how do all of these things stand in the way of happiness personally and as a species, as social groups, as nations, and is there anything we can do about it? And I'm not going to say, do they find the answer? It's pretty complicated, and yet it's so simply presented. The way it's presented, the way they talk, it isn't dumbed down. You can tell it isn't, but even a first grade child could understand basically what they're saying. And you really feel that you get to know the Dalai Lama. It also, I got to say, it's funny hearing the narrator, because remember, I'm downloading all these books. These books, by the way, The Art of Happiness, that's the first one in the series, The Art of Happiness in Troubled Times, which is what I'm reading now, or it might be In a Troubled World. You will be seeing the name in front of you with a graphic. And then finally, The Art of Happiness at Work. These 3 books, published by Howard Cutler, came out of these conversations. The conversations took place from 1998 through, I believe, 2009 and a little later than that. Okay, so it covers a lot of history. I know that The Art of Happiness, the first one, is available in print, but the other ones you need to download, and it's really interesting listening to them, because you often are hearing Cutler saying, quite often the phrase comes up when he's talking to the Dalai Lama, "You know, Your Holiness," and that phrase is quite often said. And you realize, yeah, that's of course what you'd call him, but you can tell that they're on a very casual basis with each other. And it's just interesting how accessible this great historical figure and man is, and how smart Cutler is, and how he throws in his own knowledge of psychological studies and history and all of the learned studies of different famed psychologists, and how he throws in his take with the Dalai Lama's sort of overreaching Buddhist history and take on humanity. I can't recommend it enough. You don't have to read it all at once. It's going to take a while. But anywhere you dip in, you're going to find it, I hate to say enlightening, but it kind of is. Okay.
How in the world did the gentleman from Phoenix meet the man from Tibet?
Well, you know what? I'm going to have to research that, and we're going to have to cut, and I'm going to have to come back and tell you. Hey, I'm back. Well, Pat asked such an interesting question, and I hadn't anticipated, but I'm really glad that she did, because the answer is really interesting. So the question was, how did the psychiatrist Howard Cutler meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama? So here's an interview with him, and it's from, let me see, it's from bookbrowse.com if you want to look it up.
That's a good source.
Yeah, and the first question is, how did you come to know the Dalai Lama? And here's Howard Cutler's answer. In 1981, I received a small research grant from the University of Arizona College of Medicine to travel to Dharamsala, India, to study the traditional Tibetan system of medicine. At that time, the Dalai Lama's late elder brother, Lobsang Sangden, was director of the Tibetan Medical Institute, and it was through him that my first meeting with the Dalai Lama was arranged. Over the years since then, I've attended many of the Dalai Lama's public talks, arranged private audiences with him in India and during his visits to the US whenever possible, and, acting as one of his hosts, had an opportunity to meet with him daily during a visit to Arizona in 1993. So that's how that interesting friendship and partnership began.
Isn't it amazing what comes into your life? And he took advantage of it, and I don't mean advantage in a loose term. He saw somebody he wanted to get to know and learn from. It just astonishes me what happens when we let things happen the way they should.
Indeed. Gosh, that even sounds like it could be a Buddhist way of looking at things. And also, I think of right livelihood, one of the eightfold paths of the Eightfold Path, right, where you are doing something that for your livelihood that benefits others, and this surely could be seen that way. This body of works could definitely be seen as having some benefit to human beings, or I would hope so. I think it could do everybody a little good just to read any part of it.
All of it, absolutely.
Yeah. So, folks, we gave you a lot of interesting choices, I think, for this summer. And remember, anytime you have any questions about anything or anything you want to share with us, go ahead, either fill out a comment card, come in and talk to us.
Or Absolutely. Come talk to us at the information desk. You'd be surprised at how often your suggestions get moved on to other customers as well.
Mm-hmm.
The books that we have talked about today, we will have on our, back up. The beach books we have on order. They are not in yet, but if you go online to scottsdalelibrary.org, you can call up the titles of those books. You can make a reserve on them. And when you scroll down, each of the books in our system have wonderful summaries and synopsis of each book.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not sure, read that. I also like Kate's suggestion of our downloadable audio books. Take advantage of that. Try that when you're taking that road trip that we talked about in our last session. I think it's a remarkable thing to do and to learn from. So with that, happy reading, happy summer, and if you do have a day at the beach, just enjoy it.
I agree. See you next time.